People who suffer serious injuries can bleed to death in as quickly as 5 minutes. And in many cases, that can happen faster than the time it's going to take an ambulance to get to the scene. So stopping the bleed is crucial to saving a life. And here to tell us about a free training, Stop the Bleed, I'm talking with Chief Medical Officer for the City of Houston, Dr. David Purse. Good morning. Thanks for joining me.
Hey, good morning. Thanks for having me.
So tell us about this training. What is the training? Where is it?
Yeah, so it's called Stop the Bleed training, and people may have seen, in the workplace and out in the community, these Stop the Bleed kits that are very often right next to the automated defibrillator, and wondered what those are. So in those kits, there are a couple of pieces of equipment that you can use to stop bleeding from people who've been critically injured. And as you said, there's training involved. In the kit, there are basically, or in the training rather, you'll basically learn about 3 ways to stop bleeding. One is to apply direct pressure. The other is to pack the wound, and that's does require a little bit of training to do properly. And then the third is how to apply a tourniquet. And the tourniquet is, in these kits as well. And so, yeah, so that's what you learn with the training. And it doesn't take very long. It's only about 90 minutes for the whole class. And there's of course, a lecture section, and then there's a hands-on practical section as well.
So people will kind of learn like how to apply tourniquets and things like that, just like we've done all this training for AEDs. And now, yeah, you're mentioning it is getting more popular to see these Stop the Bleed kits. So then they'll just kind of learn how to use them.
Yeah, absolutely. The training is not difficult at all. And, heaven forbid you ever need to use it.
Right.
But if you do, the Stop the Bleed kits, they've got the equipment there. And then you can just jump on and, get involved and save a life. Because as you pointed out, with some injuries, people will bleed to death very, very quickly. And so time is of the essence.
And this is just for normal, everyday people, not just healthcare professionals, right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Just for regular folks, you don't need to be any kind of a doctor or nurse or EMT. You don't need any of that. This is regular training. The Stop the Bleed kits provide you the materials that are there. Like I said, they're throughout the community. There's no minimum age, but I do want to warn parents that we are talking about injuries, we are talking about bleeding, and so with the little ones, you might want to think a little bit about whether or not they want to see the pictures and stuff. But certainly anybody who's over the age of, say, 15 years old should be able to manage that. And the one thing about the training, again, it being pretty simple, I've actually got a tourniquet here. This is a trainer. You can see it's nice and wide, and it goes on as easily as this. You just put it on, ratchet down, and then you turn the windlass and lock it in place. And bada bing, there you go. And now, quite honestly, one thing you need to understand is when you put it on right, it's going to hurt, okay? But that's what you need to do to save a life sometimes.
Yeah. And where can people register? This is valuable information.
Yeah, so there's 2 things. One is that locally we have the SETRAC, the Southeast Texas Regional Advisory Council, and you can find them at SETRAC, SETRAC.org/Stop the Bleed registration. And they have classes locally. And if you're an employer and you want a group training, a group class, they'll set you up for that too. There's also stopthebleed.org, and that is a national organization, and they'll let you know where there are classes near you, wherever you are in the country. And in addition, they provide an online training that you can do right there at your own computer. Now, of course, you still need to go and get the hands-on part separately, but that's an easy way to go ahead and get started. It's available to anyone across the country.
What's included in those kits sold to help stop the bleed? Is it just a tourniquet, or what else is in there?
Yeah, great question. And first of all, there happen to be a variety of different kinds. Okay. So if you're the person who's purchasing it, they will guide you as to which type you might want for whether, depending on the industry that you're in, or if you're in a mall or what have you. But basically, they all have some of the same things. Yes, they've got tourniquets, and plural. They have multiple tourniquets in there. They've got the gauze dressing that you need to pack the wound. They've got protective gloves. They've got some trauma shears, because sometimes you have to cut off people's clothes to get to where you need to put on the tourniquet or pack the wound or apply the pressure. They've also got a survival blanket, which will help keep people warm in case you're outside and there's you're exposed to the elements. And then there's also a permanent marker, because one of the important things we need to know is what time did the tourniquet get put on. And so there's a permanent marker on there to help with that too. And then of course there's some instruction booklets in case in the panic you forget something.
I mean, that all does sound like valuable things to have at your disposal. But of course we know that, these things don't happen conveniently in a place where you always have these items. I've always been told, shouldn't you be taking a shirt or a jacket or something if you're in a real emergency, or are there things that you're not supposed to be using as a tourniquet?
You know, that's probably the best question that you've asked, and I really want to let people know that the characteristics of a tourniquet, I pointed out on this one, is that it's wide, right? So if you're going to use something, you don't have a formal tourniquet with you, but you want to use something to work as a tourniquet, if you can use, say you're going to use a shirt, okay, and you're going to wrap it around somebody's arm, you got to get it really, really tight. You'll know it's tight enough when the bleeding stops. So if the bleeding hasn't stopped, you still have to make it tighter. So you can use things other than tourniquets, but there are a couple of things you don't want to use, and that's something that's narrow, like a shoelace or a electrical cord. And the reason you don't want to use anything that's narrow is that all that pressure that you need to stop the artery, to stop the blood flow, it'll all get concentrated in one little part of the arm, and you can actually crush the nerves and the blood vessels underneath it. That won't happen with something which is wide like this. So a wide belt, perhaps, or the shirt, or a rag, or whatever you may. It's got to be wide, and then you got to get it tight. Then that's the other key thing. You got to get it tight. And what I always tell folks when I'm training, if you know it's tight enough when the bleeding stops, and don't be the least bit surprised if they complain that it hurts. And I'm sorry, it's going to hurt. And that you got to get that tight in order to stop the bleeding.
All right, this is really good information. Dr. Peirce, thank you so much. Of course, we'll clip this and put it on click2houston.com as well, so people can go and register and get that training, because it will definitely save lives.
Yeah, thank you, Haley. Thanks for the interest.